Good afternoon, everyone. Let's give it 1 more minute for everybody to be admitted into the Zoom. Okay, it's 1:02 now, and let's begin. Good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to the State Water Board staff workshop on proposed refined watershed analysis and Friant priority date adjustments in the water unavailability methodology for the Delta watershed. My name is Yong-Shan Gao, and I'm a water resource control engineer in the State Water Board's Division of Water Rights, and I will be your facilitator today. During the workshop, staff from the State Water Board's Division of Water Rights will describe and receive public input on the proposed changes to the water unavailability methodology, including a refined watershed scale analysis and adjustment to the assumed priority date for water rights associated with the Friant divisions of the Central Valley project. Before we get started, I would like to go over some logistics. First, the workshop is being recorded and is being streamed via webcast on the Cal EPA website at video.calepa.ca.gov. A recording will be posted on the Delta Drought webpage as soon as possible after the workshop. And let's start recording.
Shan, I believe AV is recording the webcast, and that's what will be posted.
Okay. In order to successfully manage today's workshop, we ask all speakers to submit a virtual speaker card in advance. If you have already submitted a virtual speaker card, then you should be in the Zoom meeting room. You can find the Zoom meeting information in the notice for this workshop. If you have not submitted a virtual speaker card, but would like to make a comment today, please submit a virtual speaker card now using the online form provided in the notice for this workshop. And make sure that you have joined us in Zoom. The notice can be found on our Delta Drought website by emailing baydelta@watershed.ca.gov. Lastly, you can also put questions in the Zoom chat or raise your hand in Zoom by clicking on the with action icon at the bottom of the Zoom window. Once you click on it, you will see the raise hand options there. Today's workshop will consist of 2 parts. The first one is the staff's presentation, and the second one is the opportunity for comments and questions from the public and other agencies. Following the staff presentation, we will take a short 15-minute break. Upon returning, we will begin the opportunities for public comments. We currently have 4 individuals who submitted a speaker card and plan to speak today. During the public input part of our workshop, I will put a list of the next 5 speakers in Zoom chats so that the speaker would know if their turn is coming up. Depending on the length of the workshop, we may pause for a short 10 to 15 minutes break as needed. I would like to remind all of our speakers that oral comments should address the topics identified in the workshop notice. Additional opportunity to provide inputs on other aspects of the water unavailability methodologies will be provided in the futures as explained further in this presentation. Staff will also be taking notes and may respond to any clarifying questions that you may have. So please include those questions during your opportunities to speak. If you would like to provide us written comments on the topic covered today, you can email them to baydelta@waterboards.ca.gov. The comment periods will close in 1 week. So please submit any written comments by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, November 16, 2022. As a reminder, we will address any questions submitted into Zoom chat or hand raised during this using the Zoom reaction features after the break, following the staff presentation. I will now turn it over to Jesse to begin the staff presentation.
Thank you very much, Shen. My name is Jesse Jankowski. I am a Senior Water Resource Control Engineer Specialist in the Hearings, Special Projects, and Drought Planning section of the Division of Water Rights. And I'll be talking in depth today about the proposed adjustments to the water unavailability methodology for the Delta watershed, which I will refer to simply as the methodology. Next slide, please. Here is the agenda for the entire staff presentation today. I'll begin with some background on the current methodology, discuss the proposed refined watershed analysis approach, compare the two analyses, and discuss the anticipated next steps for its rollout. Then I will hand it off to our Office of Chief Counsel to discuss the Friant project priority date adjustments before we take public comments. Next slide, please. So the methodology aggregates demands for water across the Delta watershed into 20 different sub-watersheds with specific designation for rights and claims diverting within the legal delta. Water unavailability is evaluated at 2 scales in the methodology. In the 17 different headwater sub-watersheds, which are shown in orange in the map on the right here, water rights and claims outside of the legal delta are assumed to only have access to local water supplies, so water is unavailable to them if the total demand within the sub-watershed exceeds its supply. This ensures that junior demands which can't be met by local supplies are not considered in the watershed-wide analysis. There are also provisions for assuming that a sub-watershed whose senior riparian demand exceeds its supply is temporarily disconnected from the watershed. In the entire Sacramento River watershed and the entire San Joaquin River watershed scale analyses, all supplies and demands are pooled, and total water supplies within each watershed are compared to demands in order of water right or claim priority date. Each demand is subtracted from the available supply, and at the point where 0 supply is available to a given water right or claim, water is considered unavailable at that priority date. It and all water rights or claims junior to it in the watershed are curtailed. The methodology also accounts for the commingling of supplies from the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers in the legal delta, return flows, and in-stream flow releases in excess of natural flows that are considered abandoned below their intended reach. Water rights and claims which divert from multiple sub-watersheds, including those in the legal delta with access to supplies from both watersheds, are only curtailed when water is unavailable from all sources. Public comments received on the methodology have suggested that its current watershed analysis approach oversimplifies where supplies and demands are located within the watershed, which the refined watershed analysis approach is specifically designed to address. Next slide. The proposed refined watershed analysis for the methodology improves the spatial resolution of the watershed analysis, acknowledging the connectivity of tributary streams within the Delta watershed and tracking the supply of each tributary individually. Rather than the entirety of a given demand being compared to the total supply within its respective watershed, each demand is instead distributed only among its subwatershed and any upstream subwatersheds that are expected to contribute supply to meet it. This adjustment would also designate some tributaries as available only to rights and claims in the legal delta if they don't flow into the main stem of the Sacramento or San Joaquin rivers outside of the legal delta. demands are distributed to upstream tributaries in proportion to the magnitude of supply available from each source. Water would be unavailable to a given water right or claim if there is zero supply available from all upstream subwatersheds. This approach helps address the comments received by ensuring that demands in one tributary subwatershed do not affect curtailments in a second tributary subwatershed if curtailments in the second tributary subwatershed won't make water physically available in the first. The refined watershed analysis does not change the headwater subwatershed analysis or other aspects of the current methodology. Next slide, please. The proposed refined watershed analysis makes some fundamental changes to how specific tributaries are treated in the unavailability analysis. Namely, most Sacramento River tributaries will only be available to demands on the lower Sacramento Valley floor and in the legal delta because they flow into the main stem of the Sacramento River below the Red Bluff Diversion Dam, which is the outlet of the upper Sacramento Valley subwatershed. Also, supplies from Pewter Creek and the Cosumnes, McCollum, Calaveras, and Stanislaus rivers will only be available to meet demands in the legal delta because they do not supply any demands on the main stem of the Sacramento or San Joaquin rivers outside of the legal delta's boundaries. Compared to the methodology's current analysis, the refined watershed analysis may, under certain circumstances, result in less curtailments in Sacramento and legal delta tributary subwatersheds because there are fewer competing demands for the available supplies. Conversely, the refined watershed analysis may result in more curtailments in valley floor and San Joaquin tributary subwatersheds because there are fewer supplies available to meet demands in those areas. The refined analysis also would change the way in which demands in the legal delta are prorated between the Sacramento and San Joaquin watersheds. Under the current analysis, appropriative demands in the legal delta are apportioned between watersheds based on the total supply available from each. Under the refined analysis, this proration would instead be calculated for each individual water right or claim based on the remaining water supply available from each tributary at its priority date. This is consistent with the refined method of distributing demands between upstream subwatersheds, which is applied to water rights and claims outside of the legal delta. The refined analysis would not impact the assumption that water rights and claims in the legal delta are not curtailed unless there is determined to be zero water supply available from all upstream tributaries for an analysis period no shorter than 30 days. Finally, because water availability changes based on location within the watershed, the refined analysis would not produce the same watershed-wide curtailment dates as the current analysis. For example, currently a curtailment update might say that all post-1914 appropriative water rights with a priority date of 1919 or later would be curtailed within a given watershed. Instead, both the subwatershed level analysis and the refined watershed level analysis will produce curtailment dates that vary based on subwatershed and for the legal delta. Next slide. So it should be easier to demonstrate most of these comparisons and concepts with visuals. This slide shows two schematics. The methodology's current watershed analysis is conceptualized on the left, while the proposed refined watershed analysis is conceptualized on the right. The figure on the left shows how the current watershed analysis lumps all water supplies and demands in each watershed together into the dashed line boxes. This includes demands on the valley floors and supplies from small tributary streams, which are not included in the larger subwatersheds that point into each watershed's box. The figure on the right demonstrates the subwatershed connectivity, which is included in the refined watershed analysis. A demand within a given subwatershed is only supplied by that subwatershed and any that flow into or point into it. Again, the major differences in the refined approach on the right are the connectivity of most Sacramento tributaries only to the lower valley floor. as well as the designation of Buda Creek and the Cosumnes, McCollum, Calaveras, and Stanislaus rivers as flowing only into the legal delta. These assumptions are made only for the purposes of curtailment analyses under these emergency drought regulations. Next slide. So here are the same diagrams overlaid with two specific examples of how a given demand would be treated under the current approach compared to the refined analysis. Diversion number 1, the red boxes, is located in the upper Sacramento Valley. While under the current watershed analysis, it would be lumped in with supplies and demands for the entire Sacramento watershed and a prorated share of the legal delta, in the refined analysis, it would only be distributed between supplies from the Sacramento River at Bend and the small tributaries in the upper Sacramento Valley. This may make curtailment of this right more likely since it has access to less supply in the refined approach. Diversion 2, the yellow boxes, is located on the Calaveras River. While the current analysis considers the Calaveras to be available to the entire San Joaquin watershed and a prorated share of the legal delta, the refined analysis acknowledges that the Calaveras doesn't supply any San Joaquin diversions outside of the legal delta. Therefore, diversion 2 may be less likely to be curtailed under the refined analysis because there are fewer demands for supply from the Calaveras. Next slide. I do want to note that a couple changes have been made to the draft methodology spreadsheet, which contains the refined watershed analysis that was posted along with this workshop's notice on our website since its public release. These were made in order to make it consistent with the existing methodology that is used to issue curtailments on a weekly basis. First, the refined watershed analysis was corrected to make abandoned in-stream flow releases in excess of natural flows not available to riparian claimants. Adjustments were also made to how demands and curtailments in disconnected subwatersheds would work. Both of these are now consistent with the existing methodology's approach. They were just inadvertently left out of the draft spreadsheet. There were also various efficiency improvements made to speed up the spreadsheet's calculations. This includes the consolidation of both headwater and watershed scale analyses into a single tab, and the streamlining of other tabs containing supply and demand calculations. These don't affect the results of the analysis at all. They simply change the format in which the spreadsheet calculates and outputs intermediate data in order for it to run faster. Other edits made are consistent with edits to the existing methodology used to inform regular curtailment updates. And this includes the ability to use projected demand data collected from large water users via enhanced reporting, which was implemented for the first time on curtailments issued last Friday. It also includes complex priority date changes that were approved for Oakdale and South San Joaquin irrigation districts in the city and county of San Francisco. And finally, it includes a shift to the use of supply data for water year 2023 beginning on October 1st. This did make one additional water supply forecast trace available from the California-Nevada River Forecast Center, CNRFC. We will work to make a draft spreadsheet containing the refined watershed analysis with all of these modifications available following the workshop. Next slide. Finally, here are the anticipated next steps for the rollout of the refined watershed analysis for curtailment purposes. Comments received at this workshop and in writing by the noticed deadline of 5 p.m. on Wednesday, November 16th will be considered. The refined watershed analysis and other adjustments to the methodology will be fully documented in the 8th version of the methodology report and appendices, which are expected for public release around December of this year. An additional staff workshop is also planned to address methodology issues not discussed today, including legal delta supply considerations and return flows, and this workshop is to be scheduled in early 2023. Further revisions to the methodology report and resources would be released following that workshop and additional input. And now I will turn the presentation over to Dana Heinrich from the Office of Chief Counsel to provide a summary of the proposed adjustments to the assumed priority dates for water rights associated with the Friant division of the Central Valley project. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Can everyone hear me?
Sounds good, Dana.
Great, thanks. Again, my name is Dana Heinrich. I'm a staff attorney with the State Water Board's Office of Chief Counsel. As Jesse just said, staff are proposing to change the priority dates for the water rights for the Friant division of the Central Valley project, or CVP. As explained in more detail in the summary report for the methodology, the water rights for the State Water Project and most of the rights for the CVP are treated as junior in priority to all of the other rights in the Delta watershed. The basis for this assumption is legal protections for areas of origin, which establish that water right holders within a watershed have a priority of right to all the water reasonably required to adequately supply their beneficial needs relative to the project's rights to export water from the watershed, even if the project's rights are otherwise senior. Area of origin protections also extend to an area immediately adjacent to a watershed of origin, which can conveniently be supplied with water therefrom. The methodology provides an exception to the assumed junior status of project rights for 2 of the 3 rights for the new Malonas project, because those 2 rights for that component of the CVP don't authorize water to be exported from the Delta watershed. Staff are proposing to add another exception for the Friant division of the CVP based on the U.S. Supreme Court's 1963 decision in City of Fresno versus California. In that decision, the court discussed area of origin principles as applied to Friant Dam and indicated that the Friant service area is an area immediately adjacent to the watershed of origin that can conveniently be supplied with water therefrom within the meaning of the statute. Accordingly, it does not appear that deliveries to the Friant service area should be treated like exports, and staff proposed to amend the methodology to assign the underlying priority dates to 4 water rights for the Friant division, which range in date from 1915 to 1927. This concludes the staff presentation, and I will turn it back over to Shen.
Thank you, Dana. Before we move on to the public comment portion of this workshop, we'll take a short 15-minute break. We look forward to hearing any feedback, question, or comment that you may have after the break. And we will resume at 1:39. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you all have a good break. And we will now move on to the public comments portions of our workshop. I will call on the people who submitted a virtual speaker card first, and then I will go on to the people who submitted their questions in Zoom chat, and those who raised their hand in Zoom. So please introduce yourself at the beginning of your comment. If you have any clarifying questions, please include them during your speaking time, and we will do our best to respond immediately before moving on to the next speaker. And I would like to call on the speaker by putting a list of the next 5 speakers in the Zoom chat window, and then I will say out the name of the next speaker. Right now, we have 5 individuals who submit their speaker card. And our next first speaker is Ms. Janice Solesi. Please unmute yourself and you may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon. No comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. And then the next speaker is Mr. Nick Bonsino.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any comments.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker will be Mr. John Herrick.
This is John Herrick. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
I'm John Herrick of the South Delta Water Agency. I'd like to repeat a few comments we've made before. First of all, I do appreciate the fact that there's apparently a workshop next year, early next year, with Delta Supply as the topic. But I'd like to repeat my comments made in the past because they haven't been addressed yet, in my opinion. The first is that the methodology, of course, has to be based on facts and the legal principles. And I don't think it's doing that, either of those, with regards to the Delta. So last time I proposed a number of questions to the state board staff, and I still am waiting any sort of answer or contact where we can discuss them. But the first question is, do the channels of the Delta naturally contain water at all times? The answer is yes. Now, again, the Delta is certainly unique, but that doesn't change the fact or make it unfair that there's always water in the Delta. So when you're calculating a water supply availability, you can't ignore the fact that in one place in the state of California, or at least one place, there's always water. So you can't conclude that the water is unavailable. So the next question was, does a riparian or a pre-1914 right holder, does his or her rights depend on the quality of the water? And that's one of the things the staff has done. It's calculated that when outflow decreases or turns negative, that water quality in the Delta gets worse. And when that happens, then the right somehow is not available to the right holder. Well, that, of course, is wrong. There isn't any law, or I haven't found any law, and the state board hasn't presented any law that suggests that that is the case, that as water quality decreases, somehow the right decreases or eventually goes away. Now, it's important to note that the water quality in the Delta, when it slowly decreases under natural conditions, that doesn't prevent anybody from diverting, and it's up to the diverter to decide when and how much he or she wants to continue to use. So the next question I presented was, are water sources other than the San Joaquin River naturally in the Southern Delta? Well, the answer to that, of course, is yes. If the San Joaquin River stops flowing and the Sacramento River has 10,000 CFS flowing, there's still always water in the Delta. You can shut off all of the inflows and there's still water in the Delta. So there's always that supply, no matter from what area it comes from. So the conclusions and calculations that the state board staff are doing in the methodology take into account the mixture of the tributary water in determining how much water may be available for an in-delta diverter. The mixture is irrelevant because there's always water. Now, the follow-on to that is there's always water because water will come in from the west, which is from the bay and eventually from the ocean. But that water is not unusable quality. Recall that some of the water that's already exited, say, the Antioch area, that was previous in Delta water supply, and it slowly moved, depending on the tides and the outflow, it slowly moved towards the west. But then when the outflow decreases, then it slowly moves back toward the east into the Delta. Well, water that was 2 days ago part of the Delta supply, but moves west of Antioch, can't suddenly be unavailable to Delta users when the outflow changes. I think that's a very important point that is completely ignored, I think, by staff. Now, the last question I'll go over quickly is, can in-delta riparians and pre-1914 right holders divert when previously stored waters in the delta? Well, of course, the answer is yes. The first support for that statement or that conclusion is that we've already presented the law that says if somebody contributes to a supply of water and improves the quality, they can't prevent somebody else from diverting if that person could have diverted absent the added supply. That's the Butte Canal case. Now, we've heard no response with regard to that case, and we don't understand why that doesn't apply in this case. Now, another important part of that is it's the project's purposes in statute and regulation to protect the water quality in the delta. So if they add water to a supply that's always there, so they're not increasing the supply, but they increase or they improve the quality, you can't say that nobody can divert from that source anymore, because that's their job, is to maintain water quality in the delta. Then further support from that is, of course, the Racanelli case, which we've quoted 1,000 times. And the Racanelli case concludes, based upon Water Code sections 12,200 et sec, that the projects must provide water quality protection, fulfill water rights in the delta, and provide an adequate supply for in-delta users before they can export any water. And so, again, we would appreciate if the staff could answer these questions, and then we could try to address them, rather than having calculations that, although they didn't curtail in-delta riparians this summer, the calculations would have allowed them to. So we're only being protected by a policy statement that says, as long as there's some water coming in from a watershed, we're not going to curtail delta riparians this year. But that's not correct. That's just a policy decision. That's not a factual or legal decision. And so we would ask that the staff coordinate a meeting with us, and I can come to your office and we can discuss these things, and you can tell me where I'm wrong on the facts and the law, and then we'll try to work it out. I appreciate your time very much. Again, I look forward to the staff workshop early next year, and thank you.
Thank you, John. We will have an upcoming meeting, as you said, to discuss the topic that you just discussed in your comment, and we really appreciate your comment. Our next speaker is Ms. Susan Paulson. Ms. Paulson, you can unmute.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay. Yeah, following on from John Herrick's comments, just a couple of things really quickly. We appreciate that there will be another workshop in early 2023 to address, conditions related to how water availability is determined within the delta and how return flows are handled. We trust and we hope that the comments that we've raised will be, the topic or subject for discussion at that workshop. A related thing, I think, is that we've attempted to conduct an analysis of how the revisions that were discussed today, the revisions upstream in the watersheds, will affect inflows to the delta. And we've done just a preliminary analysis that appears to show that delta inflows may be reduced slightly by these changes in methodology. But we were just looking at pretty much one hydrologic condition, recent conditions. And so the questions that we would have related to what was presented today would be whether this small reduction in delta inflows is typical, and what we should expect changes in delta inflows to be when the revisions are implemented at other times of year and under a full range of hydrologic conditions. And that's it. And we look forward to the workshop on the delta issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paulson, and our staff, Jesse, would answer your question.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Paulson. I would encourage further consideration when we release kind of the updated draft version of that spreadsheet. To be clear, those delta inflows are what is assumed in the methodology. That's not necessarily any kind of actual measured delta inflows. We will have to consider that as part of other considerations that are being undertaken for evaluating legal delta availability, but we do feel that these proposed adjustments do better reflect physical conditions and the presence and unavailability of supply based on where rights and claims are located. We think that these adjustments better reflect the realities of the watershed. So we will consider and look into that further.
Thank you. We agree conceptually, by the way, with the updates in the methodology. It's much better to do it on a watershed basis, but just trying to figure out how that does affect things in the Delta. So thank you.
You're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I unmuted myself. I did not realize. Sorry. So thank you, Dr. Watson. Our next speaker is Dan Nomolini. Dan, please unmute yourself.
Dan Nomoli Jr.
Yes, this is Dan Nomolini Jr. Can you hear me? Can
Yes,
you guys hear
we
me?
hear you well.
Okay, my internet, it's stalling the video, but if you can hear me, I am Dan Nomolini Jr. with the Central Delta Water Agency, and we agree with John Herrick that the handling of the Delta is mind-boggling to us. So we look forward to that future workshop. It's really messed up in our view, but focused on this topic, this has always troubled me, and I wanted to take the opportunity to ask. It says your notification for this workshop described the current situation, and so I'm wondering if that's applying to the refinements. If it is, then I want to better understand how this works. But the current situation says subwatersheds where total riparian demand exceeds available supply are considered disconnected from the watershed. So my first question before I ask more about that is that carried over into the new refined analysis? If somebody could answer that, then
Yes and yes, Dan. So that has been in place in the methodology for some time. That's what I refer to as kind of temporary disconnection. So yes, this has been part of the methodology and will continue to be a part of the methodology under these proposed adjustments.
Okay, then if I could take this opportunity to pick your brain. Under the riparian rights doctrine, any water within a connected river is to be shared among other riparians. So I'm confused as to why upstream water that's connected to a downstream river, I'm confused as to why that would ever be disconnected. That supply that's available upstream should be shared with all the riparians in the upstream subwatershed as well as the downstream watershed. So if you could help me understand the basis for disconnecting a supply that adds to a downstream supply. Jesse, if somebody can answer that. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, Dan. I'm going to request that our attorneys weigh in on that if possible.
Okay.
Dana or David, do you have any suggestion?
Oh, there we go. I'm very sorry. I was having difficulty unmuting.
We can hear you, Dana.
Okay. That is just one of a number of nuances that well, the methodology makes a number of simplifying assumptions, and this is one of them. And I understand your point, Mr. Nomolini. I think the simplifying assumption is just that the riparians within a subwatershed, if the natural flow were available to them and inadequate to meet their needs, that they would divert it all. Arguably, some amount of that supply should be considered available downstream, even if physically the riparians were to divert it. We could certainly take into consideration whether an additional refinement should be made in that regard, but I'm not sure how feasible that would be from a technical standpoint.
And I did
Okay.
want to just note that based on the principles of the methodology, we have never curtailed riparians downstream. The curtailment of riparians has only occurred in headwater subwatersheds when there has been zero supply available.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you for that. I suspected it was a simplification of some sort, but cutting off an upstream source of water, that would affect pre-1914 folks downstream. It affects the total supply of water available downstream. But I appreciate that clarification. I need to process this some more. I figured it was a simplification of some sort, but I think it might not be a good one, but thank you.
One other point just related to that, slightly different. Camera on as well, is that one thing that the methodology does that is an improvement over the way water unavailability was determined in past droughts is not applying when demand within a subwatershed exceeds the supply of that watershed, not attributing that demand to other supplies within the larger watershed. So that's one area where the methodology represents an improvement over past water unavailability determinations.
Yeah, it may be that offsets the removal of the supply, the fact that you remove the demand. Okay, I need to process that more. It's kind of a complicated thing to get my head around, but thank you.
It is.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nominelli. We don't have any virtual speaker card anymore, so let's move on to the Zoom chat. We have one question or several questions submitted by Mr. Mass Moses in the Zoom chat, and I will read out the questions and then our staff will answer them. The refinement that was presented today that removes some downstream tributary supplies from comparisons to upstream demand seems like an appropriate improvement. Will you extend that same logic to the valley floor subwatersheds so that tributaries that join the Sacramento or San Joaquin downstream of diversions on the valley floor are not included in the supply total for those upstream diversions? Also, can you provide a summary of the diversion that are included in the valley floor subwatersheds and a geographic location for each?
Yeah, and I can answer both of those questions. So the first part, the methodology represents some simplifying assumptions, and this includes the aggregation of demands based on where they're located. While we're proposing these improvements, at some point, acknowledging interconnectivity of tributaries is a much more complex, iterative, hydrologic-based model would require that. And at some point, it goes beyond the complexities and abilities that we have to develop these tools under this drought emergency. So something like eliminating demands that cannot be met above the confluence of several tributaries to the valley floor, I think that does verge into complexities that we may not have, the resources and the ability to address during this drought. We do have to make some of these assumptions, and that includes kind of clustering based on watershed. And we also don't have the availability of supply information for a lot of kind of very small streams that are not these major systems and tributaries to the valley floor. So disaggregating what supplies are able to meet those demands can be difficult. And we do think that these assumptions do kind of represent conservative assumptions that would result in fewer curtailments rather than more curtailments based on, say, a more complex model. And then the second question, providing a summary of diversions that are included in the valley floor and a geographic location. So the methodology spreadsheets, both those posted on our Delta Drought website, as well as those posted on our FTP site, those do contain, it's the final demand tab, those contain POD latitude and longitude coordinates for all of the 19,000 PODs throughout the Delta watershed. And each of those has the assigned sub-watershed as well as the calculated demand that is assigned to each of those points of diversion. So though while we aggregate those to a sub-watershed level, we don't necessarily tie them to specific tributary individual streams. Those coordinates are present in the methodology. And Matt or anyone is welcome to contact me if you email the Bay Delta inbox, bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov. That question can be routed appropriately to me. I can certainly direct you to the right data to obtain these demands and geographic locations in the valley floor or elsewhere, as well as to obtain information to access that FTP site as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Do we have any more questions? Please feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand. No, looks like we don't have any more questions. Then that concludes the public comments. Thank you all for participating today. I would like to next slide. Let's have the final slide. Yes, thank you. I would like to remind everyone of the available resources and the way that you can contact us and stay informed. We already mentioned that, but let's go over it again. If you have any questions, please send an email to baydelta@waterboards.ca.gov. I put that email on the in the Zoom chat already, or call the Delta Drought phone line at 916-319-0960. Our staffs are monitoring the email inbox and the phone line, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. As I mentioned before, you can still submit written comments related to the workshop topics to baydelta@waterboards.ca.gov until 5 p.m. on Wednesday, November 16, 2022. If you haven't already done it, we strongly encourage you to subscribe to the Delta Drought email list to receive important information regarding the drought in the Delta watershed. To sign up, please visit the Delta Drought website that Jesse just put in the chat, and provide your emails in the email subscription list box at the bottom of the web page, as shown in the right-hand side of the slide that you're looking at. STAR will be updating the Delta Drought website as well as the water unavailability website with current information. So we encourage you to check these sites frequently. Jesse also put the water unavailability website in the chat. If we don't have any more question or comment, then that concludes today's STAR workshop. We checked. Yeah, we don't have any more questions. As previously mentioned, the recording of this workshop will be posted to our website as soon as possible. We appreciate your time and your participation today. Thank you and have a good rest of the day.